Benny?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Nerdala for inviting me. I am very excited to be here. Let's just jump into it, because I don't have much time, right? This is a talk that could take easily many days. We could have long conversations about the different pros and cons for everything, but it is something I've tried to bring into a smaller little bit of 30 minutes, right? Because we're limited on time, I'm not going to spend much time on myself. That's me. You can find me either upstairs at the AlmaLinux booth, or you can find me on the internets. I'm around. I have spent what I think is a long time in open source, but it's certainly not as long as some of the other folks here. So if you have counterexamples, do not hesitate to say so. There's no ego in this talk, I promise. Someday I'll figure out how to use the button. We're going to start with what I think is one of the hardest things in the current open source ecosystem, and the thing that keeps getting kind of muddy, and that is the definition of open source. If you were just here, then the first few minutes of this talk is going to be kind of a repeat, right? If you're at this event, you are familiar with at least one of these licenses. For any software to be considered open source, you have to be using an open source license. That's one of these. You've seen these. These can be split into two groups pretty easily. Permissive at a high level means that you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Copyleft at a high level means that there are limitations about how you can use the code, and mostly one of the big things is that if you're going to use that code and redistribute it in any way, then you have to keep the license that it came with. Those are the big high-level differences. If you want to go digging, the OSI website has all of them, and you can read all of them, even just the summaries. Let me tell you, it was many days. So it's a good time if you're a weirdo like me. The OSI, for the last almost 30 years, has been the authority for what open source is. They are the shepherds, they are the guardians, they are the ones that say, this license is or is not open source, right? They have this definition, and any software using one of those licenses will generally be easy to understand and move forward with that code sort of license. One of the big things here is the lack of discrimination. So it doesn't matter who you are, whether I agree with you politically, whether I agree with any of the hot button topics, how you raise your children, how you get up in the morning, whether or not you brush your teeth before or after your shower. It does not matter. I don't get to decide that you are or are not allowed to use my code once it's released under an open source license. And that is one of the hardest things for people to understand. And that's where things get kind of murky. Because open source software is used everywhere. There is no industry that has not started to adopt at least a little bit open source software. It's also created everywhere. And this is both the exciting part and the part that gives me some concerns when we talk about whether or not you want to participate in an open source project. That's that list, this licenses URL. Don't do it. Love yourself more. So if we talk about how you choose what you want to do, which projects you want to participate in, there is a list of stuff that you're going to go through. If you're here, I'm going to assume that you have already done a lot of these things. You already know what languages and what technologies you are comfortable with. You already generally know how to participate in open source. And you are here looking for help evaluating projects. Before we jump into that, though, there are two things that I never see addressed in any of these guides. Or if they are kind of glossed over. And so I'm going to highlight these two because every new person to open source or every new person to contributing to open source needs to hear these two things. And those of us who have been around a long time need the reminder. We always do. The first one is all about time. How much time you have to give to an open source project. Your time is valuable, both to you and to the project that you're contributing to. It is not something that you need to dismiss as you're saying, no, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Make sure that you know that. It is also extremely limited, right? All of us have the best intentions when we look at something. We choose a project, we get excited, we overcommit, now we feel bad. I promise that is a cycle that every new person does, and every existing long-term contributor does the same thing. We just recognize how much stress it's going to cause us. It's the only difference. So when you get involved, take very small bites, take very small commitments, and do those things. Even if you think, no, I've done that a million times, I know how to do it, I can do it very easily, it's still work. And life still gets in the way. Because as soon as something in life pops off, the rest of the commitments start to become more important, and open source falls to the bottom of the list. We've all done it, we've all felt it, we've all been on that side of it, but just know that if you have promised 10 things, those 10 things are going to be waiting for you when you get back, because nobody else has picked them up. So, only take one at a time. You'll love yourself more. If you're here, you've also, I'm going to assume, have a good idea of the benefits of open source. You know that the, bless you, you know that the, for anyone joining an open source project and trying to contribute to it means you get to practice coding, or you get practice with whatever skill you're trying to build in that project. You can build relationships, and you can make new friends. You can, for old fogies like me, you can give back to the open source community that has helped you throughout your career, right? And that coupled with this is, like I was saying, is where things start to get muddy for me. It's where I start to have both excitement and concern. Haha, muddy. I'm so funny. If you're here, great. If you're not here, I'm going to recommend that you go do an internet search and find 5 of the top ranked guides. Don't read less than 5, but 5 guides that tell you how to choose your open source projects. Because they're all out there, there are tons. I found this one at a skim, it looks great. They do a good job, and it will get you started in that process. Do not read less than 5, because they all have different opinions. But once you do, you're on your way. Oh yeah, the things that they don't, I'm supposed to have speaker notes. I don't have speaker notes, I just have my slides, so I get to remember things as you see them. The thing that none of those guides address, and that's very important to me, is money, right? The things that we don't like to think about if we're in open source because we're idealistic is that it doesn't matter how the software is used or how it's made, whether it's open source or closed source, money has to be involved, no matter what. We can't magically set up build pipelines without money. It's got to be somewhere. This definition also does not address money, right? There's no mention of how it's monetized in any way. So it has to be something that we consider outside of this, and outside of those guides, and everything else. You can break it down. I really fought with myself about how I was going to break this down, a lot. But the first thing we're going to do is exclude any project that is one contributor, a small group, You and your buddies getting together on the weekends doing something cool. Because those are not going to fit into this breakdown, and they're honestly not the ones I'm worried about. Because those are the ones where there's a mutual understanding. There might be fights, you'll deal with those later, but that's not the one that I'm worried about. Ultimately, most of them can be broken down into two categories here. They're either corporate-backed or they're foundation-backed. For corporate-backed, you're going to think about things like Automatic, like Nginx, like Chef. There is a company that primarily manages and owns that project, contributes to that project, that I just realized that Automatic is on this list, and there's a whole drama about Automatic. If you haven't heard, there's drama, just like open source, right? But that's how those projects primarily get their funding, is those companies, right? And then foundation-backed can actually be broken into two other categories. There's foundations that have more than one project in them. So think Apache Foundation, Eclipse, Linux Foundation. They'll have many, many projects that are under their umbrella that might compete or might not. They might collaborate or might not. They might know each other exists or not. Because especially if you look at the Linux Foundation, it is massive, the number of projects that they are responsible for. And then there's single project foundations. So in this case, we've got things like the Rust Foundation. Their whole thing is the Rust language, right? Same with GNOME. Their whole thing is the DE. I would be remiss if I didn't include us in this list, even though it is hilarious to put us against these two. Like, I do want to pause, though, to say this does not mean good or bad or evil, or what's the opposite of evil if I already said good? Who knows? The reality is you have to choose where you're comfortable, and sometimes that means you're going to go contribute to a corporate-backed project, and that's okay. Or sometimes it means you're going to find a foundation-backed project that you really care about, and you're going to go contribute, and that's just fine. There is no inherent good, bad, evil, nice. None of that is here. I have opinions, but that's not what I'm here to say, right? I'm not going to judge you for finding your comfort. Once you have started to find where you want to be and what you want to do, this is great. Okay. If you haven't watched Community, you need to watch Community. It's amazing. But the thing that foundation-backed, the benefits and drawbacks for each of these two, the multi-project foundations or the corporate-backed projects, you're going to, we'll separate corporate out. When you walk into a corporate-backed project, you're going to find a lot of money, frankly. Most of the people that are most invested in those projects are highly money motivated because they want to keep their jobs. The people that are involved will have, you'll have like a marketing team that gets to do marketing stuff. Normally you'll also have like a DevOps team or a developer relations team that will help onboard new people to the community. You've got people who will write documentation. You've got people who, because it is a corporate-backed project, can provide all of those things, right? With a foundation project, a foundation-backed project, those things are going to be harder. They might exist, but they might not. You might feel a little bit like you're walking into this kind of chaos, because when it's a foundation-backed project, if you are a programmer, you know writing documentation is not number one for you, right? And that means that we have to find, as a foundation, our job is to find people who like to write documentation. Guess how many people those are that want to do it for free? Very, very few, right? So unless we convince the people or make it a requirement for the people who are contributing on the development side, documentation is hard. It was hard for people who were paying for it. It's hard for us who are not paying for it, right? This chaos, it can be off-putting because there isn't always going to be a this is how you contribute guide. It might be that you have to figure it out You have to enter the chat and say, hi, what do I do? How do I see this problem. How can I fix it? And that's okay. Most projects are going to be extremely happy that you're there and happy to help you figure that out. Happy to help you walk through the process. That's awesome. I love this. Seriously, if you haven't watched it, it's worth it. If you like sketch comedy at all, or you like witty humor, this is you. Not always is it going to be on fire. Not always is it going to be complete chaos. But it is sometimes. And that's not always a bad thing. Because if you are, I love this meme too, if you are the kind of person who recognizes, okay, it's a mess because you're short on volunteers, that gives you an opportunity to fix something that theoretically is relatively easy for you to fix. They don't have a contributor guide. Cool. Hi, let me help you with a contributor guide. I know that I've got these 5 that I've read in the last 2 weeks. I can help with this. Where do we want it? How do we want to do it? What do you want to do? It's real easy to help fix those sorts of problems, and it gives you an opportunity to help in a way that they have not been able to make it work yet, right? You're plugging a hole. Open source is for everyone. We all come to it with different views and different ideas, different perspectives, and we all know that when you put all of those things together and pool the resources, we get to make something incredible. And that's the beauty of open source. If you, like me, want to make sure that the project that you are working on is something that aligns with your morals, and everything seems good, they have a code of conduct, they have whatever, everything feels good, and you are not sure, this is how you find out if you're going to be backing something that you don't want to back. I'm gonna throw my friends under the bus a little bit. I worked for a company called Chef, and when I hired in there, they had just had a fairly public, very problematic outage that was caused because they ignored a tweet, like we do, when somebody said, "How dare you have a contract with ISIS?" Or not ISIS, oh my God, with the other side of it, with the US government that mans the border. And they had a contract that started with Homeland Security and like trickled down, and yeah, they had an actual like contract with the border control people. And it was during a time where the news was full of very problematic stories, and somebody said, "How dare you do this?" They ignored it, did not react, and then that person went to a developer of a Ruby gem that Chef had incorporated and said, "Do you know they're doing this?" Chef said, and that person said, "No, I did not. Thank you for letting me know." They pulled their Ruby gem off of GitHub, and it broke Chef installs across the planet. And that's the kind of thing that is an intense reaction from my perspective, but it's okay, because in open source, we get to decide things like, I don't like this, this is what we do. That person who had released it in a public way went back on, I don't remember now if it was actually open source licensed. If it was, they're compromising that you don't get to define who interacts with your code or who uses your code. You cannot be, there's a D word that was at the beginning of this sentence. You cannot discriminate between the different people who use your project. But as a person who's contributing, I absolutely can. And that's what we get to do. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I like to bring it up all the time. My buddy Joe Brockmeyer did a keynote at a tiny, tiny event in Ohio in the US called OLF. It used to be called the Ohio Linux Fest. And he said this: open source is not a spectator sport. And that is one of the most important things that I can pass on to you. You don't have to like any specific project, but if you are using open source, find a way to give back, because it is a hard thing to manage. And that's how you support open source in the future. That's it. Who's got questions? Oh, also, shameless plug. If you want to hear more about, or you want to see more about AlmaLinux, go ahead and grab that. Thank you.
Muy bien. Hola, hola. Ahí está. ¿Preguntas? Questions? Of course, my friend.
Of course. Right up front.
Right up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's that kind of student.
He questioned every speaker. Yeah. Julia, be prepared.
Oh, no.
Check, check.
The question mic isn't working.
Thank you.
Hang on one second. We'll get you.
Right up.
Thank you.
Ah.
Thank you, first of all. I want to thank you specifically because I didn't know what this talk was going to be about. And I found it very good to make people go into developing open source as contributors. And personally, I have contributed to some open source projects, and I really felt your words. Some of the things that you talk about are always being inside open source, like the anxiety of participating and then the down of that, and other things. I think that are very like we as contributors feel about developing open source, and it's really important not only to all of us to identify, yes, that's a common feeling about it, and putting it into words is good for everyone, but also to encourage people to contribute to open source, to look for projects, to even the little help that you can make. It's really important, and I want to thank you to put that into words, because it's important to keep the open source growing, that everyone can help a little, and they have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Give back what open source gave us, because open source gave us internet, gave
Yes.
us everything that we have today. And
Yeah.
phones in the way that are now are thanks to open source. I wanted to thank you about it.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. It was most a statement than a question.
Yes.
Okay.
There was no question in there. But you're welcome. Thank you.
Someone has a question? Yes.
Okay, I was going to say,
Yeah.
no questions.
It's about AlmaLinux.
Yeah.
What's the origin of the name, of the distribution, but also of the name that is in the Spanish word?
So, yeah, we, this is going to be on the internet, so I'm just going to tell the real story. So, we, when everything went down with CentOS and we were deciding what we were going to call it, we were still very much in our feelings, right? And Alma, as you know, in Spanish and many Latin languages, means soul. So we wanted to name it AlmaLinux because it takes us to the soul of a community open source Linux. Yeah.
Awesome.
Hi. I was wondering how will you classify the Mesa project? Because I see it like a combination of everything. You have people that contribute on their free time. You have companies. You have Intel. Now you have NVIDIA, and it seems it's not as strict as corporate, and it seems a bit chaotic from the outside. What's your opinion on that?
What's the name of the project again?
Mesa.
Mesa. I don't think I know that one.
The GPU drivers, Rappi.
I haven't been paying
the
attention to it.
drivers of the NVIDIA GPU.
Oh. So that's hard because there is no foundation behind it, right?
Right.
But it is backed by multiple companies. So in the end, it's going to act a little bit like both. You're going to have the corporate side that has to balance community feature requests with corporate needs, right? And you're going to have the foundation side, which is anybody can be there, and there's hopefully at some point they set up some kind of neutral governance, because if that happens, then it's going to feel very foundation-y, right? Right now, I don't think I'll personally, or I would personally go contribute in that space,
I see.
but that's not a statement against it. It's just, I want to put my time in a place where I know that neutral governance is a priority, and it doesn't sound like they have made that a priority yet.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Amazing. More questions? Don't be shy. In Spanish, you can do it. Lo pueden hacer en español.
Yeah.
Tratamos de traducirle, no hay problema. How big is the AlmaLinux community?
So, what number do you want? We have, I think there are, 3,000 people in our chat now. But the chat is definitely the smallest of all of our numbers.
Okay.
The adoption rate is one of my favorites, because there's very, with any open source project, if you can download it and use it for free, and we're not getting shipped information about it, then it's hard to know who's using it. But with our mirror system, if you are using our mirror system when you get updates, then we see that your server exists. That's the only thing we see. And the architecture, but it's very minimal. And with that information, we know how many devices are calling home to us for updates. And we just passed 1.1 million.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we're only 3 years old, so I think we're doing all right.
Good numbers in 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. We're very excited, because at the same time, I know for sure that there are a number of companies that are using AlmaLinux and are not using our mirror system, so they don't register on my radar at all. And I only know about them because they come up to me at conferences and they tell me about them.
So it's a pretty common practice that companies do their own mirror to avoid some security issues.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Security issues or just traffic, like bandwidth. They want to limit the amount of transit they have to pay for, that kind of stuff. It's easy.
Yes. One more question. Come on, guys, don't be shy.
How is money not more divisive? Go ahead.
I have a question. It might be a more personal one, but do you daily drive AlmaLinux? And if so, what does your setup look like? As in DE, text editor, stuff like that?
So I do not daily drive AlmaLinux. It is running on my server, where my website lives, and a couple other websites. It is as a desktop, it is an easy operating system to install. I will tell you, my mom daily drives AlmaLinux. But my mom daily drives AlmaLinux because she retired and needed a laptop. And so we installed AlmaLinux on an old laptop, and now she has a laptop. If you text editors, VI forever. Like, the reality is that when I was working at one of my old jobs, and I was there for almost 10 years, they set me up with a Mac, and if it's going to slow me down at this point, I'm probably not going to change. My Mac does what I need it to do. I get a lot of shit for it.
Amazing.
Yes.
Another question? Come on. Hey.
Hey, I would like to know how you fund the project in terms of money.
Ooh. How we fund it?
Yes.
Yeah, so sponsors. So it's a foundation, right? So we get companies that bring to us either resources or like transit or servers or anything like that. Or we have people that are employed by companies that get to work on AlmaLinux full-time or at least part-time. And then obviously cash. We have 30 sponsors total, and I actually just did this math the other day, but I don't remember. I think it's about half of them just support us with cash. And it's an incredible thing to be fully funded. We were fully funded after the first year. And it's being a 3-year-old project with this kind of response is unheard of, unless there's contention at the beginning, right? So, yeah, it's been exciting.
Another question. How many people do work in the AlmaLinux Foundation?
So 0 people are employed by the foundation.
Okay.
We have about, between releases, I would say we have about 20 regular contributors. Around a major release, that'll jump up to 40 or 50, depending on how it's being built. We get a lot of engineering support from our sponsors for that, specifically TuxCare and CyberTrust Japan. They both give us engineers that help us with the release building.
Oh, amazing. So the fundraising is mainly for infrastructure and okay.
Yeah, and getting me here.
Getting you here, okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
¿Alguna una pregunta más? One question? Come on. No? Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.